to hockey superpower and captured the hearts of fans on Broad Street and beyond. The Original Six, a term well known to hockey historians. The Montreal Canadiens, Toronto Maple Leafs, Boston Bruins, New York Rangers, Detroit Red Wings, and Chicago Blackhawks all captured the attention of sports fans throughout North America.
Well, I was in the record business years ago. A friend of mine and I were having a drink in New York City, and he said, look, I got an extra ticket, you know, to the Garden tonight. The Rangers are playing Montreal. And I said, what's that all about? And he said, well, it's the National Hockey League. Would you like to go with me? I said, yeah, I'll go. I said, you know, I didn't have anything else to do that night, so we went to the old Garden, and I fell in love with the game instantaneously. It was, without question, the greatest spectator sport I had ever seen.
The buildings were full, and they'd been full for years and years, and the competition in between the six teams was absolutely at its highest.
Riding that popularity, the time had come to enlarge the six-team league.
I heard that the National Hockey League was expanding from 6 to 12 teams. I thought that it would be great to apply for a franchise.
Ed Snyder, who was working with the Philadelphia Eagles at the time, thought the city of brotherly love would fall for hockey just like he did. But other cities were applying, and Philadelphia's history in hockey was not good.
All the other applicants for the six franchises were from cities that had pretty successful minor league hockey operations for a number of years. Philadelphia was the only one that hadn't. They had 7 or 8 minor league teams that had failed. There had been one quickly aborted attempt in the 30s to have an NHL team. So there was no history of Philadelphia really being enamored with the sport at all.
However, Ed Snyder, along with Bill Putnam and others, persisted. And on February 9th, 1966, their hard work was rewarded.
This is the year of the great expansion. For the first time, the league will be composed of 12 teams.
Clarence Campbell presided as the teams entered the league. The Philadelphia Flyers, Minnesota North Stars, LA Kings, Pittsburgh Penguins, St. Louis Blues, and the California Seals.
The 6 new teams would play in one division. But before they took the ice, the Flyers had a lot to do.
One of the requirements for expansion was to have a building that would seat at least 12,000 people. So they built the Spectrum, and it was really the first modern arena of any kind in Philadelphia. And they built the building in a little more than a year, so that it was open in time.
But who would actually take the ice wearing the orange and black? That process was led by GM Bud Poyle and head coach Keith Allen.
We basically bought the Quebec Aces, and it gave us people like Andre Lacroix, Jean-Guy Gendron, and other players that were on our original team, and it helped us tremendously. And in addition to that, Keith Allen worked for a year prior to our starting date and scouted the 6 clubs that were then in existence, and we had, without question, the best expansion draft of any other team.
As far as the goalies were concerned, we thought they were the 2 best young goalies available, and fortunately we got both of them.
I have to admit, at the time I was disappointed.
Joe was probably the loudest guy in the National Hockey League.
Oh boy, that was depression for a while.
Ed Van Emp had played with Chicago and was a hard-hitting, rugged defenseman.
Unfortunately, I wound up in Philadelphia.
And Gary Dornhofer was all-out 100% of every game. He gave everything he had every game.
I was probably like the other guys. You know, I had to look on the map. Where the heck was this Philadelphia?
I was the second player taken by Philadelphia, and I was working for the public works department in British Columbia, and I was flagging people by. You know, I was a flag man, and this person got by and says, "I hear you just got drafted." And the guy said, I said, "What do you mean drafted? You get drafted by Philadelphia?" I said, "What?" I went to my boss. I said, "Oh God, I got to take the rest of the day off. This is very depressing for me because I thought I had a good year in Boston, and I played with Orr, and to go to an expansion team, it was very difficult for me."
My first exposure to Philadelphia was at an Eagles football game, and they introduced a guy on the starting defensive team. I swear to God, all 50,000 stood up and booed. And I said to the people that were there with us, what in God's name did this guy do last week to deserve it? And apparently he had a bad game, and I thought to myself, oh my God, what are we getting ourselves into here?
Perhaps the toughest task facing the new franchise would be winning over the Philly sports fan.
Philadelphia, you know, wasn't really a great hockey town when we first arrived there, and it took a lot of work by Ed Snyder and the rest of his staff to try to get people out there.
When we were brand new and we were ready to play our first game in a few days, the city said, well, we'll have a parade for you, and we'll start at City Hall, and we'll go down Broad Street all the way to the Spectrum. And we said, fantastic.
And the advanced publicity was the Iceman coming, and they had all the players in convertibles, and we were downtown at noon hour.
We paraded down Broad Street, you know, to the Spectrum, but there was one issue. Nobody came.
There were more people in the parade than were watching the parade.
People were looking, they were wondering, who the heck are those guys?
And I said to myself, God, I don't know if we're going to last here very long in Philadelphia.
The team's first game was on the road in Oakland on October the 11th, 1967, where they suffered a 5-1 loss. But it was the home opener that was on everyone's mind.
We played Pittsburgh, and I remember we had about 7,600 people at the game. The president, Clarence Campbell, was there to drop the puck, and I remember there was a guy named Bill Sullivan, and he was an older guy, and he had come from the Quebec Aces. He scored the winning goal in the game. We won 1-0, and I remember he almost didn't get in the building. The guard didn't think he was a hockey player. He looked too old to be a hockey player.
The Flyers went unrecognized at first.
It was interesting when we started here. I was able to get a lot of tickets, you know, and spread them around to people that I got to know, especially golf professionals, so I kept them supplied in tickets.
If you have a good crowd behind you, it will help you perform better. And that was the part that was a little bit difficult at the beginning.
But the Flyers did perform well, and soon enough the fans were filling the Spectrum.
We got a pair of tickets, went to the game, and really enjoyed it. And we ended up buying season tickets. Now, a season ticket in those days was less than $100.
When it took off is we played back-to-back games in November against Chicago and Toronto. And both of those games were sold out, and I realized hockey was going to take off in Philadelphia.